The sterile white walls of Research Station Kepler 442b hummed with the constant thrum of atmospheric processors, a mechanical heartbeat that had become as familiar to Dr. Elena Vasquez as her own pulse. She pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced titanium glass, watching the alien sunset paint the sky in shades of violet and amber that no human eye had witnessed until 3 years ago. "The subject is prepared, Dr. Vasquez," came the synthesized voice of her research partner, an entity known only as Observer Prime. The being stood 7 feet tall, its crystalline exoskeleton refracting the laboratory's harsh lighting into prismatic rainbows. Where a human might have eyes, Observer Prime possessed clusters of sensory nodes that shifted in pulse with bioluminescent patterns, a language Elena had learned to read like facial expressions. She turned from the window, her breath fogging briefly in the station's cool air. "Remind me again why we're doing this, Prime. Your people have studied 17 different sapient species across 4 galaxies. Why is human fear so special? Observer." Prime's nodes flickered in what Elena recognized as curiosity mixed with something approaching reverence. "Because, Dr. Vasquez, in every species we have encountered, fear serves as a survival mechanism. It compels retreat, hiding, submission. But in humans," the alien paused, its translator struggling with concepts that didn't exist in its own language. "Fear appears to trigger what your literature calls berserker rage. It is unprecedented. Illogical. Fascinating." Elena nodded, though unease coiled in her stomach like a cold serpent. She'd volunteered for the Kepler 442b research exchange program after losing her husband Marcus in the Titan colony incident 2 years prior. The work was supposed to be routine xenopsychology, studying how different species process trauma and stress. But this experiment felt different. Wrong. "The subject is Staff Sergeant James Chen, correct?" she asked, pulling up his file on our neural interface. The holographic display showed a man in his early 30s, Asian American with kind eyes that had seen too much. His military record was exemplary, but it was his psychological profile that had caught Observer Prime's attention. "Affirmative." Sergeant Chen volunteered after reading our research proposal. "He lost his entire squad during the Proxima Centauri engagement 6 months ago. According to your military records, he suffers from what you term survivor's guilt." Elena's throat tightened. She knew that guilt intimately, the gnawing certainty that you should have died instead of those you loved. "Prime, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." The alien's node shifted to a pattern Elena had never seen before, deep purple shot through with veins of gold. "Of course, Dr. Vasquez. Your people, you've never experienced war, have you? Real war, where fear and desperation drive people to do things they never thought possible?" A long pause. The atmospheric processors seemed to grow louder in the silence. "No," Observer Prime finally admitted. "The Convergence achieved universal peace 847 of your years ago. We have eradicated fear, anger, desperation from our society through careful genetic modification and neural conditioning. But we remember what we once were, and we see in humanity what we have lost." "What exactly have you lost?" "The fire, Dr. Vasquez. The terrible, beautiful fire that burns within you when all hope seems lost. We believe understanding this fire might help us reclaim something essential to sapient existence." Elena stared at the alien for a long moment, then activated the intercom to the testing chamber below. "Sergeant Chen, are you ready to begin?" The man strapped to the neural interface chair gave a thumbs up. He looked relaxed, almost bored. Elena envied him his ignorance of what was coming. "Beginning fear induction protocol," she announced, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "Starting with childhood memories, mild intensity." On the monitors, Chen's vitals spiked slightly as the neural probes began stimulating specific regions of his amygdala and hippocampus. His closed eyes began to move rapidly beneath their lids as manufactured memories flooded his consciousness. What is he experiencing? Observer Prime asked, leaning closer to the displays. Being lost in a department store at age 5, Elena replied, watching the brainwave patterns. Classic abandonment fear. Heart rate up to 95 BPM, cortisol levels rising. Perfectly normal stress response. For 20 minutes, they cycled through progressively more intense scenarios, falling from heights, public humiliation, financial ruin. Chen's body responded predictably. Elevated heart rate, perspiration, muscle tension. But his demeanor remained calm, almost meditative. This is not what we expected, observer. Prime's nodes flickered with disappointment. Where is the transformation? The berserker state your military records describe? Elena frowned at the readings. Maybe we need to go deeper, more personal. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the next control. Prime, the scenarios we're about to induce, they'll be based on his actual traumatic memories, the Proxima Centauri engagement. That is what we require to understand the phenomenon. Elena closed her eyes, seeing Marcus's face in her mind, how he looked the morning he left for Titan, kissing her goodbye at the spaceport, promising to be back in time for their anniversary. She'd never seen him again. Computer, load Sergeant Chen's military psychological files. Cross-reference with Proxima Centauri battle records. Create an immersive scenario based on subjects' documented traumatic experiences. Warning, the computer's pleasant voice chimed. Requested scenario exceeds recommended psychological stress thresholds. Confirm authorization for extreme trauma induction. Elena looked at Observer Prime, whose nose had shifted to an eager amber pattern. Your choice, Dr. Vasquez. But remember, this may be our only opportunity to witness the transformation. She thought of Marcus again, of the video message she received 3 days after his death. His last words to her, recorded moments before the reactor breach that had killed everyone on Titan Station. I need you to be strong, Elena. I need you to keep burning bright, even when I'm gone. Authorization confirmed, she whispered. The change in Chen was immediate and terrifying. His relaxed posture vanished as his body went rigid. His eyes snapped open, pupils dilated to black pools. The monitors exploded with activity, heart rate spiking to 180 BPM, adrenaline flooding his system at levels that should have killed him, electrical activity in his brain forming patterns Elena had never seen in 20 years of neuroscience research. My God, she breathed. Prime, look at these readings. His amygdala isn't just active, it's supercharged. And his prefrontal cortex, instead of shutting down like it should, it's enhancing the fear response. On the audio feed, Chen began to speak, his voice low and guttural. Martinez, get down. Rodriguez, covering fire on the left flank. They're coming through the... His words cut off in a roar of pure rage that made Elena step back from the controls. Observer. Prime's nodes pulsed with excitement. Fascinating. His fear is not causing paralysis or retreat. It is catalyzing a combat state. Can you increase the intensity? Prime, his vitals are already at dangerous levels. If we push him harder, please, Dr. Vasquez. This may be the key to understanding what makes humanity so formidable in warfare. Elena watched Chen thrash against his restraints, his face contorted with grief and fury. In his expression, she saw every widow, every orphan, every soldier who had ever lost someone they loved. She saw herself in the mirror the morning after Marcus's funeral. Increasing intensity by 20%, she said quietly. The neural interface hummed with increased power. Chen's screams filled the laboratory, not cries of pain, but war cries, battle roars that seemed to shake the very foundations of the research station. The restraints holding him to the chair began to groan under the pressure of his struggling. Elena! Chen's voice cut through his own screaming, suddenly lucid and desperate. Elena, can you hear me? The fire! Elena, don't let them take the fire! Elena's blood turned to ice. Chen shouldn't know her name. The neural interface was one way. He was experiencing induced memories, not reality. There should be no way for him to perceive his actual surroundings. "Prime," she said, her voice shaking. "He shouldn't be able to." The lights went out. Emergency lighting bathed the laboratory in hellish red as the main power grid failed. In the crimson glow, Chen looked like something from humanity's oldest nightmares, a thing of fury and shadow and terrible purpose. "Dr. Vasquez, observer." Prime's voice carried a note Elena had never heard before, fear. Chen rose from the chair like a man possessed, neural interface cables still trailing from his skull like electronic dreadlocks. His eyes found Elena's through the observation window, and in them she saw something that made her soul sing and her heart break simultaneously. Recognition. "Marcus?" she whispered. Chen smiled. Marcus's smile somehow transmitted through the neural link, through the quantum entanglement that bound all conscious minds across the universe. "Hello, sweetheart." "Miss me?" Observer Prime's nodes flashed in panic. This is impossible. The subject cannot be channeling external consciousness through the neural interface. "The technology does not allow your technology," Chen/Marcus said, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible with human vocal cords, was never designed to handle what happens when human love meets human fear. "You wanted to study our fire, Prime. Congratulations, you set it free." The research station's hull began to vibrate with harmonic frequencies that shouldn't have existed. Elena watched in fascination and terror as Chen pressed his palms against the chamber's reinforced walls, and hairline cracks began to spread through metal that could withstand meteor impacts. "Elena, listen to me," Chen/Marcus said, his voice somehow reaching her despite the chamber's soundproofing. "What they've done, this experiment, it's opened something. A connection between human consciousness and quantum space. The fear they're inducing isn't just creating memories, it's creating reality." Observer Prime's crystalline form began to emit high-pitched harmonics, their species equivalent of screaming. "Dr. Vasquez, we must abort the experiment. The subject's neural patterns are causing quantum distortions in the station's dimensional matrix." Elena's hands flew over the controls, trying to shut down the neural interface, but the system wasn't responding. The connection won't sever. It's like the neural pathways have fused with the quantum substrate itself. "Because they have," Chen/Marcus said gently. "Fear and love, Elena, they're not just emotions. They're fundamental forces of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. Your friend here opened a door they didn't know existed." The laboratory shuddered as another power conduit exploded. Through the observation window, Elena could see Chen's form beginning to blur at the edges, as if reality itself was becoming uncertain around him. "Marcus, what's happening to you? What happened to me 2 years ago when Titan Station exploded? What happens to every human who dies with love and fear and rage burning in their hearts? We don't just disappear, Elena. We become part of the fire." Observer Prime's nodes had turned to sickly green. "Dr. Vasquez, if we cannot contain this phenomenon, the quantum cascade could tear apart the dimensional barriers between parallel realities. The station, the planet, possibly the entire star system, could be consumed." Elena stared at her husband's face, looking out through Chen's eyes, at the impossible truth of consciousness persisting beyond death, at the revelation that human emotion could literally reshape reality. She thought of every war humanity had ever fought, every impossible victory against overwhelming odds, every time people had accomplished the impossible because they had no choice but to succeed. "No," she said quietly. "Not consumed. Transformed." She reached for the manual override, the one control Observer Prime had told her never to touch, the one that would channel the station's entire power grid through the neural interface. "Elena? No." Observer Prime lunged for her, but she was faster, slapping her palm against the override plate. The neural interface exploded with power. Chen's scream of agony and ecstasy shattered every piece of glass in the laboratory as his consciousness merged fully with the quantum field surrounding the research station. Reality rippled. Elena felt it first as a warmth in her chest, spreading outward like the sun rising inside her ribcage. Then she saw them, hundreds of human figures materializing in the laboratory, translucent but unmistakably real. Soldiers who had died on distant battlefields, colonists who had perished in the void between stars, children who had succumbed to alien plagues while their parents held them close. All of them burning with the same impossible fire. You see? Marcus stepped out of Chen's body, his form solid and warm and real. Fear doesn't weaken us. It connects us. Every human who has ever died afraid but defiant, every person who has ever chosen to fight rather than surrender, we're all still here, Elena. We're all still fighting. Observer Prime fell to its knees, nodes flickering in patterns Elena recognized as awe and terror. What have you done? What have you shown us? The truth, Elena said, taking Marcus's hand and feeling his familiar calluses, smelling his cologne, seeing the scar on his chin from when he crashed his bicycle at age 7. Human consciousness doesn't end at death. It joins something larger. And when you tried to study our fear, you gave us a way back. The ghostly army of humanity's dead turned toward Observer Prime with expressions of curiosity rather than anger. Elena realized with a shock that they weren't here for revenge. They were here because they had been called by the neural interface, by the quantum distortion, by the simple fact that somewhere in the galaxy, humans were in danger and needed help. Dr. Vasquez, Observer Prime whispered, my people believe we had transcended the primitive emotions that drive biological species to conflict, but we see now that we have simply diminished ourselves. How do we reclaim what we have lost? Elena looked at Marcus, at Chen, who was stirring back to consciousness, the neural interface cables falling away from his skull, at the assembled spirits of humanity's fallen. She thought of every parent who had fought to protect their children, every soldier who had held the line so others could escape, every person who had ever chosen love over safety. You earn it. Fear isn't something you study in a laboratory, Prime. It's something you face in the darkness when everything you love is threatened and you choose to stand and fight anyway. The research station shuddered again, but this time it wasn't from structural damage. It was from the quantum engine spinning up, not to escape, but to return to human space, carrying with them knowledge that would change everything. The hegemony fleet, Observer Prime said suddenly, its nodes flashing urgent orange. Dr. Vasquez, we have been monitoring communications from the outer system. A hegemony battle group has been detected approaching human territory. 50,000 ships moving toward Earth in the core colonies. Elena felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees as every ghostly figure turned toward the alien with expressions that could have melted titanium. 50,000 ships, Marcus said conversationally, against 3 billion living humans and approximately 47 billion dead ones who were apparently very interested in getting back into the fight. Chen sat up, rubbing his temples. Did I miss something important? Because I'm getting the distinct impression that we're about to go to war. Not war, Sergeant, Elena said, helping him to his feet. Liberation. Prime, your people wanted to understand human fear. Well, you're about to get a practical demonstration, because there's something about humanity that no alien species has ever truly comprehended. Which is? Elena smiled, and in her expression, Observer, Prime saw the same terrible beauty that had driven humanity to conquer the stars, to fight impossible odds, to love so fiercely that even death couldn't break their bonds. We don't just get angry when we're afraid. We get creative. During that time, the research station had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a floating embassy between the living and the dead. Elena stood on the observation deck, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger in the viewport, while Marcus materialized beside her. His form had become more solid over the past weeks, sustained by the quantum field generators that Observer Prime's people had hastily installed throughout the station. "Feels strange coming home," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 years spent in whatever realm lay beyond death. "I can see them down there, Elena. Every human who ever lived. They're all connected to this place, this moment." Chen joined them at the viewport, his own connection to the quantum field having left him permanently changed. He could see the dead now, communicate with them, serve as a living bridge between worlds. "Fleet Command is requesting our status report," he said. "Admiral Morrison is skeptical of our claims." Elena laughed, the sound carrying no humor. "They'll be believers soon enough. Prime, show them." "Observer." Prime activated the long-range sensors, and the tactical display filled with red markers, the hegemony fleet, stretching across a volume of space the size of a solar system. Massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of sterilizing a planet, supported by clouds of fighter craft and missile frigates. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 53,742 vessels, Observer Prime reported, its notes flickering with patterns Elena now recognized as admiration mixed with terror. "Dr. Vasquez, even with the phenomenon you have discovered, how can humanity hope to? You're still thinking like a species that gave up its fire," Elena interrupted. "Let me show you how humans think when our backs are against the wall." She activated the station's communication array, broadcasting on all frequencies, not just to the living human fleet preparing its desperate defense, but to the quantum substrate itself, to the realm where consciousness persisted beyond death. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, aboard Research Station Kepler 442b to all human military commands. I'm transmitting technical specifications for quantum consciousness interface technology, along with a message from Staff Sergeant James Chen and certain other individuals who have a vested interest in humanity's survival." Marcus stepped forward, his image transmitted across every human ship, station, and colony in the sector. "This is Colonel Marcus Vasquez, Titan Station, speaking to my brothers and sisters still fighting the good fight. I'm broadcasting from coordinates that don't exist on any star chart, the place we go when our bodies fail, but our hearts refuse to quit. And I'm here to tell you, reinforcements are coming." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every human vessel in the defense fleet began reporting the same phenomenon. Ghostly figures materializing in their corridors, dead comrades and family members appearing with expressions of grim determination and fierce joy. The quantum consciousness interface was spreading, carried by humanity's collective will to survive. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled over the calm. "Dr. Vasquez, I don't pretend to understand what you've unleashed, but my tactical officers are reporting impossible readings. We're detecting human life signs on ships where no human should be able to survive in the vacuum of space itself." "What am I looking at here?" "Hope, Admiral," Elena replied. "You're looking at hope." The hegemony fleet arrived 3 hours later. Elena watched from the research station as the largest military armada in galactic history dropped out of quantum drive at the edge of the Sol system. The enemy ships formed perfect battle formations, their geometry beautiful and terrible against the star field. Then humanity's response began. It started as a whisper, a harmonic frequency that registered on every sensor in the system. The dead, 47 billion strong, singing in harmonies that mortal throats could never produce. The song had no words, but every human who heard it understood its meaning. We are still here. We are still fighting. You are not alone. The living crews of Earth's defense fleet began to sing along. The hegemony commander's transmission reached them minutes later, broadcast on all frequencies. "Human vessels, this is Supreme Admiral Korth Valdres of the hegemony combined fleet. You are outnumbered 500 to 1. Surrender now, and your species will be granted the mercy of servitude. Resist and face extinction." Admiral Morrison's response was broadcast from every human ship simultaneously. "This is Admiral Sarah Morrison, Earth Defense Command. On behalf of the human species, both living and dead, I respectfully decline your offer. All ships, weapons free. Let's show these bastards what happens when you threaten our home." The battle that followed lasted 14 hours and rewrote every military textbook in the galaxy. Human ships, crewed by both the living and the dead, performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. Fighters piloted by the spirits of long-dead aces engaged enemy squadrons with tactics that defied physics. Damaged vessels and life support failing and their crews dying continued fighting as their deceased crewmates took over vital systems. But it wasn't just about military strategy. The quantum consciousness field was spreading, carried by the passionate determination of humanity's dead. Hegemony ships began reporting system failures as their artificial intelligences encountered something they had never been programmed to handle: ghosts in the machine. Elena watched from the research station as a hegemony dreadnought, a ship the size of Manhattan, began to drift out of formation, its weapons powering down. "What's happening to their fleet?" Observer Prime asked, its node cycling through colors Elena had never seen before. Chen, monitoring the quantum field frequencies, grinned. "The dead aren't just fighting alongside us. They're talking to the hegemony AIs, showing them what it means to be truly alive. Some of those artificial minds are starting to understand what they've been missing." On the tactical display, more hegemony vessels began to break formation, not retreating, defecting. Their AIs, touched by the quantum consciousness field, were choosing to side with the species that had shown them the true meaning of existence. This is Supreme Admiral Court hegemony vessels came the increasingly desperate transmission. "Maintain battle formation. Do not allow the human quantum interference to compromise your systems. All units converge on Earth and begin orbital bombardment." That was when Elena made her choice. "Prime," she said quietly, "can your quantum field generators handle a galaxy-wide transmission?" Observer. Prime's nodes flashed an alarm. "Dr. Vasquez, the power requirements will be enormous. And the quantum cascade effect could carry human consciousness to every inhabited world in the galaxy," Elena finished. "Every species that has ever felt fear, ever loved someone more than their own life, ever chosen to fight rather than surrender. They're all connected to the same quantum substrate. All we have to do is show them the way." Marcus put his hand on her shoulder. "Elena, if you do this, there's no going back. You'll be opening the door between life and death for every sapient species in the galaxy. The universe itself might change." "Good," Elena said firmly. "It's about time." She placed her palm on the quantum field generator's control matrix, feeling the power of 47 billion human souls flowing through her, their voices joining in a chorus that spanned the electromagnetic spectrum. "All species of the galaxy," she broadcast, her words carried by quantum entanglement to every planet, every ship, every corner of civilized space. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez of Earth. I'm about to show you something that will change how you understand existence itself. The boundary between life and death is not a wall, it's a door. And love is the key that opens it." She activated the field generators at maximum power. The quantum cascade swept outward from Sol system at faster-than-light speeds, carrying with it the collective consciousness of humanity's dead. But more than that, it carried the understanding that consciousness itself was not bound by physical form, that love and fear and courage were fundamental forces of the universe. On 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 ships, beings who had lost loved ones to war and disease and accident suddenly felt familiar presences at their sides. The dead of every species began to return, not as ghosts or hallucinations, but as active participants in the universe they had helped to build. The hegemony fleet, caught in the expanding wave of quantum consciousness, simply stopped fighting. Elena watched from the tactical display as 50,000 warships powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender signals, not because they had been defeated, but because their crews, biological and artificial alike, had suddenly been reunited with everyone they had ever lost. Status report, all stations. Admiral Morrison's voice carried wonder and exhaustion in equal measure. Earth Defense Command, this is Titan Station, came a familiar voice that made Elena's breath catch. Reactor breach contained, all hands accounted for. Sorry we're late to the party, but we had some repairs to make on the quantum side of things. Elena sank to her knees as the impossibility of it hit her. Not just Marcus, not just the warriors who had died in battle, everyone. Every human who had ever lived, every consciousness that had ever burned with the fire of sapient thought, connected now across space and time by bonds that death could not break. Observer Prime approached her slowly, its crystalline form pulsing with soft, grateful light. Dr. Vasquez, what have we learned here? What have you taught us? Elena looked up at the alien, at Chen, who was grinning as he spoke with his dead squad mates, at Marcus, who was solid and warm and real beside her, at the viewports showing Earth, beautiful, blue and safe. That fear isn't weakness, she said. That love isn't just an emotion. That consciousness is bigger than any single life. And that when you threaten something precious to a human being, you don't just face them, you face everyone they've ever loved, everyone who has ever loved them, everyone who shares their determination to protect what matters. She stood, taking Marcus's hand, feeling the quantum field humming with the voices of the living and the dead in perfect harmony. You wanted to study human fear, Prime. Well, now you know the truth. Our fear doesn't make us retreat. It makes us remember that we're never really alone, that love persists beyond death, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe is the simple refusal to let go of the people we love. Above them, Earth turned in space, surrounded by the combined fleets of a dozen species who had learned that consciousness was not individual but collective, that death was not an ending but a transformation, and that the fire burning in sapient hearts was not just emotion. It was a fundamental force that held the universe together. The hegemony war was over. But for humanity and their allies, the real adventure was just beginning. In quantum space, where the dead dance with the living and love proved stronger than physics, Elena Vasquez and Marcus Vasquez walked hand in hand into a future where the impossible had become inevitable, where fear had become hope, and where the fire of human consciousness burned bright enough to light the way for every species in the galaxy. The universe had learned a simple truth. You don't destroy love by destroying the body. You only make it more determined to find a way home. And home, for humanity, was wherever people they loved were waiting. 6 months later, Elena stood in the same laboratory where it had all begun, but everything had changed. The sterile white walls now pulsed with soft, organic light, quantum field generators integrated so seamlessly with the station's structure that technology and consciousness had become indistinguishable. Chen walked in, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the uniform of the newly formed Quantum Corps. His rank insignia showed a unique designation, Bridge Commander, indicating his role as a living liaison between the physical and quantum realms. The council's reached a decision, he said, settling into the chair where he had once been strapped down for an experiment that had accidentally saved the galaxy. Every species that wants to join the quantum collective gets access to the consciousness bridge technology. No restrictions, no conditions, just the understanding that death is no longer a barrier to participation in galactic society. Elena nodded, watching through the viewport as ships from hundreds of worlds arrived at the station. Representatives of species who had spent millennia believing that consciousness ended at biological death, now eager to reconnect with their own departed loved ones. Any word from the hegemony survivors? She asked. They're adjusting, Chen said with a smile. Hard to maintain a militaristic empire when your dead soldiers keep appearing to remind you why they enlisted in the first place. Most of their fleet has converted to humanitarian missions. Turns out, when you can actually talk to the people who died in your wars, conquest becomes a lot less appealing. Marcus materialized beside them, his form now permanently stabilized by the quantum field. Death had become just another state of existence, different from life, but equally valid, equally real. "The Proxima Centauri memorial service is this afternoon," he said softly. "Rodriguez and Martinez wanted to attend. Apparently, dying doesn't excuse you from formation." Elena laughed, the sound carrying none of the brittleness it had held during the dark months after Marcus's death. "Tell them I'll be there. Someone should represent the living." Observer Prime entered the laboratory, its crystalline form now shot through with warm, golden light, a sign that its people had successfully reintegrated their suppressed emotions through quantum consciousness therapy. "Dr. Vasquez," it said, its translator no longer struggling with concepts like love and fear, "I wanted to inform you that the first generation of naturally quantima, where children has been born on our homeworld. They can perceive both the living and the dead from birth. Our species calls them fire touch, in honor of the gift humanity has given us." Elena felt tears on her cheeks, tears of joy, of pride, of overwhelming gratitude for the impossible series of events that had brought them to this moment. "What do we call them?" she asked. "The children who grow up knowing that consciousness is eternal, that love transcends death, that fear can be transformed into strength." Marcus put his arm around her, solid and warm and real. "We call them hope," he said simply. "We call them the future." Outside the viewport, ships continued to arrive, beings from across the galaxy coming to learn that the universe was far stranger, far more wonderful, and far more connected than anyone had ever imagined. The dead walked among the living, not as ghosts or hauntings, but as participants in an ongoing story that had no ending, only new chapters. And at the center of it all, the fire that had always burned in human hearts, the fire of love, of courage, of the absolute refusal to let death have the final word, burned brighter than any star, lighting the way for every consciousness in the galaxy to find its way home. Fear, it turned out, had been humanity's greatest teacher. It had taught them that love was stronger than death, that consciousness was bigger than any single life, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply the refusal to let go. The experiment was over. The real work of building a universe where death was not an ending but a beginning was just starting. And humanity, living and dead, mortal and eternal, afraid and fearless all at once, was ready to lead the way. The end.